Hello and welcome to the European Resilience Initiative Center video podcast. Today our guest is Dr. Heli Simola. She is a senior economist at the Institute for Emerging Economies at the Bank of Finland, and her work focuses on the economies of Russia and China. Welcome, Dr. Simola.
Thank you very much.
Your recent research demonstrates what is the impact on Russia's economy by the Russia-Ukrainian war, and what are the efforts of the Russian government to modernize its economy or to keep it running the way they need uh, to continue the war. So, is Russia economy now getting better or worse? The GDP numbers seem to be pretty fine. They have not reached yet the pre-full scale invasion numbers, but have demonstrated a clear recovery after the drop of mid 2022.
Russian economy has indeed shown growth last year, but the picture is not so rosy as the figures might suggest. Much of the growth has come from increased federal spending and also subsidized credit that has increased a lot. And the increased spending especially has been channeled towards the military industry in Russia, which has grown very much during the past years, whereas in other industries the development has been much more modest. For example, if you look at the latest figures in January March 24, the output in war-related manufacturing industries in Russia was up about 50% compared to the level before Russia's full-blown invasion. But the other manufacturing industries as an aggregate grew only by 0.5%. So these figures illustrate that the recovery in the Russian economy is relying quite a lot on specific factors and is not very widely distributed.
So that practically says that Russia's recovery or the GDP growth is mostly war production dominated. If you produce more shells, you have on the statistic level, you have like more production numbers, you have like more volume of production, more salaries are being paid. But how sustainable is this growth, and what does it mean for the economy in general? As I can imagine, like if you have like 20-30% of war spending in your economy, just like fantasy about the numbers now, that this money they cannot go into consumption, they get literally burned on the front line.
Indeed, the increased spending that the Russian government has taken on after the war has started has largely been spent on military issues. Russia has ceased to publish detailed figures on government spending after the invasion. But for example, SIPRI estimates that during the past couple of years, Russia's military spending has increased by 40% a year on average. And for this year, Russia's budget plan actually plans even a higher increase for military spending. So the economy is certainly quite focused on these war efforts. And of course, this has meant that these resources, both financial resources as well as material resources, have been taken away from other sectors. So, and Russia already has for example, a lack of labor force, and the labor force is taken to the military sectors, and the other sectors, more civilian sectors, are suffering even more from this lack of labor force. Inflation has been accelerating due to these capacity constraints, and also inflation appears to be higher in many other sectors. So these sectors are suffering from this strong focus on military issues. And of course, we also see that when the budget spending is heavily oriented towards military issues, there is less money left for other needs, for example, infrastructure investment or social issues, education, and so on. So this will be reflected in the future in the Russian economy and society.
You say that the war economy spending increase and the workforce being pulled into the war economy sector. Where does this money come from? How does the Russian state fund all this spending? I guess that most of this spending they come directly from the state budget. Where does it get money from?
Well, still, one of the important income sources for Russia's federal budget is oil. Oil and gas revenues account for about a third of the of the federal budget revenue. So that's one of the important ones, and of course, they have also started to increase certain taxes for companies. They have introduced new additional taxes for exporters. So that is also one of the sources that they are getting money for this expenditure.
When the Russian economy is now more state-run than it used to be before, what does it mean strategically for the Russian budget? Like, does it turn into a sort of a modified Soviet budget, or is it something quite new?
Well, we should also remember that Russia's budget has been running a deficit already for a couple of years due to this increased military spending. So far, they have been able to cover the deficit from increased borrowing from state banks and also using their saved income from the previous oil exports. This year, the budget will again be on the deficit, and also the budget for the coming years are planned to be on deficit. So far, the deficits have remained relatively moderate, so they have been able to finance them. But of course, if the expenditure is further increased, there will be more and more problems to finance all of the deficits. But at least at the moment, for example, for this year, I think they should be able to finance even a larger budget deficit than planned, especially using the money that they can still get by borrowing from the domestic market from the state banks.
Can we say that the Western sanctions, which have been imposed on the Russian economy, that they work? In Russia, the low technology military production facilities are growing, but the high tech production facilities also in the military area are not that successful because of the components, because of the dependency from the Western spare parts. Is it a issue which affects all the Russian economy or only parts of that? And once again, do sanctions work?
The Western sanctions do have an effect on those parts of the Russian economy that they are primarily aimed at. If we think about the Western sanctions, the key aims are to restrict Russia's financial and technological capabilities for continuing the war. For the financial part, the key measures are financial restrictions and restrictions on imports from Russia. We have seen that after these sanctions, it has become substantially more difficult for Russia to get foreign financing. These sanctions have restricted Russia's access to their currency reserves, and they have made it much more complicated for Russia to conduct international monetary transactions. Then, if we think about the restrictions on imports from Russia, there has also been an effect. Russia has been obliged to sell its oil with a discount after the import ban imposed by the EU and the price cap mechanism imposed by the EU and the G7 countries. Russia also has struggled to find new export markets for example, wood products and steel products that have been banned by the EU. So, in this sense, there has been an effect. Uh, but of course, there is still room to improve the sanctions. For example, the effectiveness of the restrictions on Russian oil exports appears to have been weakening. So there is room to improve the implementation of the exports because Russia is finding ways to circumvent the sanctions through shadow fleet and other measures. So it's important that the enforcement of the sanctions will be improved even further. But also, if we think about these restrictions, for example, the price cap mechanism, it should be remembered that the current level of the price cap at $60 per barrel is not very low. Uh, if we look at the history, the level of oil has been around the level of oil price has been about the same. For example, in 2017-18 on average. So with that kind of price level, Russia will still get some revenue from its oil exports. Then, if we move on to the other part of the sanctions that aims at restricting Russia's technological capabilities to continue the war, here the main measure has been restrictions on exports to Russia, especially on technology exports. Uh, our analysis suggests that after the sanctions, it has become more difficult for Russia to access Western technologies. And even when it has been possible, the price has been higher. So, in that sense, it has affected especially Russia's capabilities for constructing more sophisticated military and other technological products. But for some products, Russia has been able to find alternatives from other import markets, particularly from China. And also, in some cases, Russia has been able to get these Western technologies through sanction evasion via third countries. So here again, it is very important that the sanction enforcement is further improved, and there is all the time more and more focus on monitoring of the sanctions so that they could actually work in the most effective way.
That is exactly what I wanted to ask you further. What concrete steps should be undertaken to impact on a more substantial way Russia's ability to run its war economy?
Well, indeed, one of the key measures is to further improve the monitoring and the enforcement of the sanctions. Unfortunately, there is much evidence that Russia has been able to evade and circumvent the sanctions. So it is, of course, extremely important that there are more measures to this extent so that the sanction enforcement would be more efficient. In addition, there is still room to extend the sanctions, and this could also help to improve the monitoring. The monitoring would be easier if the restrictions would be more extensive, and this would leave less room for evasion of sanctions. In addition, if we think about external factors that are important for Russian economy and finances still at the moment, the key point that arises is oil. as oil is still an important income source for the Russian government. So that is one of the key factors that could affect Russia's financial position. Of course, making more extensive sanction measures would be costly also for Europe, but we do have to remember that there are costs of this war in any case, both, of course, especially for Ukraine, but also for all other European countries. So these costs will be there in any case. And I guess another thing with the sanctions, we should remember that they are one important means to support Ukraine, but the sanctions alone are not enough. They they need to be complemented with other support measures. It is extremely important that the EU countries continue and step up their financial support and also material support for Ukraine also in the coming months.
We are talking to Dr. Heli Simola. She's a senior economist at the Institute for Emerging Economies at the Bank of Finland. And in her work, she focuses on the economies of Russia and China. Don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe to this channel. And we are going further with the topics of Russia's economy, war economy, transformations within the Russia's economy, and the European sanctions and dependency of some European countries from the Russian market. Dr. Simula, Finland has demonstrated quite quite impressive record of decoupling its economy from the Russian one, and this under consideration of the fact that Finnish economy used to be very well connected to the Russia's one. How was it successful? What steps have been undertaken, and what lessons do we have for other countries which still have their dependency on Russia?
Uh, for Finland, Russia certainly was a very important economic partner before the war, especially on the import side. Uh, Russia was one of the largest import markets for Finland, accounting for about 10% of Finnish imports still in 21. And especially as a provider of raw materials like energy, Russia was quite important for Finland, with about 80% share of raw oil imports, and also an important provider of natural gas, coal, and electricity. But after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Finland was quite rapid to move on with decoupling from Russia on the import side. And actually, all of the main import items, the import stopped totally even before the end of 2022. So at the moment, Finland doesn't import any oil from Russia, no pipeline gas, no electricity, all of those. So Finland was able to find some alternative import sources, especially for oil. For electricity, Finland has also increased own electricity generation and reduced dependence on imports. And also, in some cases, energy saving has been used. Finland is aiming at carbon neutrality by 2035, and that's why the importance of hydrocarbons should become even lesser in the future. If we think about Finnish exports to Russia, Russia's significance had been declining already for a decade before the war, and Russia accounted for about 5% of Finnish exports in 2021. But that is still one of the highest shares among EU countries, together with Baltic countries. But after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Finnish exports to Russia collapsed very rapidly, and currently Russia's share in Finnish exports is practically marginal. Finland exports much more, even to faraway countries like Australia and Brazil. And even if we think about the trade share of Russia for Finland, it's in historically low levels. Last times we have seen these kind of figures in the 1940s. And also, if you think about the investment side, many Finnish companies were quite rapidly exiting Russian markets. Even though the sanctions don't oblige companies to leave the markets, Finnish companies wanted to act quickly because of moral considerations and also because of risk considerations related to the market. Of course, Finnish economy has also suffered to some extent, especially of the energy price increases that were seen after Russia's invasion. And those exporters whose exports to Russia collapsed, there were some effects for them in the short term. But it appears that if you think about at the aggregate level, the effects on Finnish companies were limited, and they have been able to recover from these shocks, finding new export markets, and also because Russia's share was not that big for them. So, in that sense, I think what is a key thing that we can draw from here is that it is possible to cut the ties with Russia quite quickly, and the problems caused by that are not so long term.
But we know that, for example, for many German companies who officially left Russia's market, for them, the Russian market continued to exist because they just started to sell their goods to Armenia or Kazakhstan. And for certain goods, the German Armenian or German Kazakh turnover has jumped by not by 2 or 3 times, but by 15 or 20 times. Is there anything like that with the Finnish exports to countries which are neighboring Russia?
Yes, there has been increase also in exports from Finland to Central Asian countries. Uh, and this is something that the Finnish customs has been very actively monitoring, and they have been already they have already started hundreds of investigations to that, and there have been also court cases. Actually, at the moment, it appears that most of the exports that now are going from Finland to Russia are not actually from Finnish companies, but from other companies that have just used Finland as a bordering country as as their route, and this has been also case for some other of the bordering countries. So it makes much more pressure for the bordering countries to monitor the exports that are going to Russia.
And we are talking to Dr. Heli Simola, who is a senior economist at the Institute for Emerging Economies at the Bank of Finland and author of report on how Russia has transformed its economy into a war economy with a larger share of state-run companies and a huge share of military spending. Don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe to our channel. And we are going to dive deeper into the question how Russia's war economy can survive, if it can survive the current situation amid sanctions war and not so good development on the domestic market. Dr. Simula, if we look into the next 1 2 years, and many military experts say that the war will continue at least a couple of years, what changes do we expect from Russia's economy, and what consequences it will have for other non-military sectors in Russia? Will Russia turn into a sort of huge North Korea with militarized sector, or will it develop some another way?
Well, at the moment, it certainly sees that there is a strong focus on developing and securing the capacity in the industries related to the war. and that are supporting the war. Uh, with the production has increased much faster in those industries that are related to the war, whereas it has been lagging in other industries. We can see from the data that also in the construction sector, much of the construction has been done in Russian regions bordering Ukraine, and also such regions that are military industry production hubs. So they have been improving the infrastructure, the transport infrastructure there. And also, if you look at the investment in Russia, there has been quite a brisk growth in investment in past couple of years, but large part of the investment has also been directed towards war-related industries, which suggests that also in the coming years, the focus of Russia will be much on those industries. And as the economy is already suffering from capacity constraints, the unemployment rate is historically low in Russia. There is lack of labor. Of course, this is a long-term trend, but it has become even worse during the wartime because people have been sent to the war, and some of the people have left the country. Uh, there are also capacity constraints related to production capacity. Capacity utilization rates are historically high in many industries. Uh, so this means that with the focus on these military sectors, there is no resources left for the other sectors, and there will be uh, less possibilities for other sectors to increase their production.
If we could imagine a similar situation in another economy which is not in a huge war, you would say, oh, like the lack of workforce means spike on salaries. It is a consumer market. You get a higher salary because everyone wants to hire you, and then you spend your salary on your lavish expenditures. You buy a house, you buy a car, you allow you a vacation which you dreamed about, or you save. Depends on your preferences. But it seems that in Russia, it's not the case.
The salaries have actually increased quite rapidly in Russia, indeed because of the lack of labor force, there has been a strong increase in salaries. But of course, this kind of strong increase is not necessarily sustainable in longer run, and the costs of the companies are increasing all the time, and also with the credit costs higher, they have less resources for paying these high wages. So this is one of the factors which points to the growing imbalances in the Russian economy. So even though in the past year there has been economic growth and the situation hasn't been looking that bad, but there are many indicators below the surface that are showing up and pointing to these growing imbalances. Uh, we have the accelerating inflation, the lack of labor force, also a weakening ruble, and various these kind of things where we can see that the situation is getting tighter. But of course, then we will have to see when these imbalances will actually build up so much that there will be more severe problems in the economy.
Can we expect sort of an economic crisis in Russia, which would have like stronger impact on the national economy?
At the moment, there are no signs, at least in the short term, that there would be a huge crisis in the Russian economy. Uh, as I mentioned, the situation is becoming more difficult with the imbalances increasing. And of course, the risks are very high with Russia continuing the war in Ukraine. Uh, there might be some abrupt changes or surprising things that could happen, and these things could cause a crisis also in the Russian economy. But at the current moment, if there are not big shocks or surprises, it seems that the outlook for the Russian economy is for slow growth. The growth will slow down from the numbers that we saw last year, but it it will be lower than in the world economy. But at the current moment, we don't see any crisis in the Russian economy, at least in the short run.
And if we look at the development of the last 2.5 years, who is the biggest profit gainer in this development, and who is the biggest loser?
Well, much of the money has been poured into the military sector, so I'm sure that people close to that have gained a lot, at least economically. Whereas then much of the problems have been accruing to such regions and industries that have been hit by the sanctions. For example, wood processing, to some extent, some metal sectors, and so on. So for these kind of companies and regions who are specialized in these industries, it has been more difficult. And also, one of the industries that has suffered quite strongly has been the car production industry, where output has declined substantially due to the sanctions and the fact that foreign companies have left the Russian market.
That is a very differentiated picture. We see the winners, the losers. We see the attempts, pretty successful, of the Russian government to modernize its economy, or at least to reform its economy to make it capable of sustaining the long war against Ukraine. And although the Russian economy suffers from certain different difficulties, the full-scale crisis is not in sight, says Dr. Heli Simola, who is a senior economist at the Institute for Emerging Economies at the Bank of Finland, and focuses in her work on the economies of Russia and China. Thank you so much, Dr. Simola, for this insightful interview.
Thank you very much.
And don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe to this channel, and to wait for the next interviews.